We've got a great mix of classes on the council, no question about it.
And I think that's something that the council really needs, is to have that kind of diversity, just so that people can understand the various issues that go on and not become like I've seen some councils in the past, both here in Durham and definitely in other cities, where it's all one-dimensional or one style of person that is pretty much, the cookie-cutter kind of image, kind of the way that some of our houses are done in some neighborhoods. But definitely in this area,
take a look at our city council. There's no cookie-cutter there, that's for sure.
No, y'all are definitely not cookie-cutters at all. I mean, there's definitely a wide range of diversity in terms of issues there. Now, the other issue that I know Dean might want to be interested to see what your views on this, because Dean, my partner in crime, is involved in the correction system there in New Jersey. But I do know that just in terms of how we handle our police force and things of that nature, that has come up several times with Durham. So I was just wondering what some of your views are in terms of what's going on with crime in Durham, as well as what we're doing in terms of the prison system and things of that nature. As I've said before, Dean is an administrator in one of the prisons up there in New Jersey.
Wow, Dean, I did not know that. That's really hard work. I can't imagine the kind of stuff you guys deal with in that job. I think Durham is doing as well as can be expected, given the changes that we're undergoing. I think anytime you've got a city that's kind of under siege from gentrification and displacement, there are going to be ups and downs in terms of the crime rate, and I think that's what we're seeing over the last 2 years. Last year, from 2018, we had crime was down across the board. Violent crime was down 18% for the year, and things look great. This year, crime has kind of risen back up, but we're still well below where we were in 2017. It's just that 2018 was a particularly low crime year for reasons that nobody can explain. Our police officers were doing the exact same amazing job they do in the field, protecting and serving the people of the city of Durham. Our police chief was doing the exact same work, being in the community, engaging with people. And so I think one of the things that I've had to learn is not to overreact to, the month-to-month increase and decrease in crime rate, but to make sure that we follow the data on how long it takes police officers to respond to important calls when they receive them, and how long it takes our detectives and police officers to clear cases. And on those two metrics, Durham's doing a great job right now. Doesn't mean we couldn't do better. Doesn't mean that we don't need to keep an eye on it. But I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind is how important it is for us to maintain this bond of trust and confidence between the people of the city of Durham and our police department. When I was first elected to the city council, we had the city manager had just fired our police chief, Chief Lopez, and I think it's fair to say that the relationship between the community and our police department was at a really low place. And shortly thereafter, we hired C.J. Davis from Atlanta to come up, and she was a true breath of fresh air, a consummate professional, someone who is in the community perhaps more than I am. Every time I go to a meeting, I see her, and I hear other people say she was at this meeting, that meeting, the other meeting. And she is not just at meetings, she is involved, she is talking to people. And I think the people of the city of Durham really, really appreciate that and frankly need that from a police chief, especially after years of a really bad relationship in some ways between the police department and the residents of the city. So I think, when I take a look at where we are right now, I think, the last 5 months, we've definitely seen more crime this year than we've had last year. But like I said, we're still well below where we were in 2017. And I think if we hadn't had 2018 as a comparator, this year would probably not look nearly as bad. So what does that mean for the rest of the year? Next year, I can't tell you what that's going to look like, but I can tell you that while I've been on the council, we have made really critical investments in our police department. Not only did we bring Chief Davis here to add a new spirit and engagement and professionalism to our police department, but we've also hired a total of 35 new patrol officers over that time. We built a brand new state-of-the-art police headquarters. We've made significant investments in pay for our police officers, recruitment incentives, and relocation bonuses. We've also created incentives for officers to live in the communities they protect and serve, which I happen to think is really, really important. And, I think all of that work that we've done, combined with Chief Davis's leadership over the last 2.5, 3 years, has really made a difference. And I think we are just continuing to work that process during this first half of the year when crime is up a bit from last year. And I think if we keep doing that and keep listening to the people who live in communities that are affected disproportionately by crime, I think we'll be okay. So that's a lot of answer, but there you go.
No, I appreciate it. And another issue that I know people are very much concerned about, and you kind of touched on it when you talked about the gentrification, but surprisingly, for all the growth and all the development that we're having here in this area, and to be the size of the city that Durham is, but it's a national issue. What do you think are some of the things that we're doing to raise awareness for our homeless people? Because I'm oftentimes amazed. I've actually got a friend of mine who's facing eviction from the apartment complex that he lives in, and has actually got surgery 2 days after he's supposed to be out with his eviction. So I do know that homeless issue has definitely become a concern for many of people and everything. But I was just wondering, what are some of the things that you've seen the city council do and some of the things that you've thought about in terms of that issue? Because I'm oftentimes amazed when you go down the streets of Durham, and, of course, we have all these people that are definitely part of the young crowd that are definitely making Durham a vibrant place to live and everything. But then, a block or two down the line, you can go down there and see homeless people laying on church steps and everything. So, I mean, not that we got, tons of them, but there's too many, in my opinion, for us to have any in terms of what you see out there. And you definitely see people panhandling on a regular basis. So I'm just wondering what some of your concerns are around that, and what are some of the things that the city is doing to address that.
Yeah, well, I think what drives homelessness in Durham in particular, I think there are really three things. Number one, as we said when we started, wages just haven't kept up with the cost of housing. And that means that people are living paycheck to paycheck, and one problem, one mistake, the car breaks down and you can't get to work. Your child is sick, you have no daycare, and you have to stay home and take care of her. There's any number of things that can happen that can disrupt a family that is sort of hanging in the balance but doing the best they can. And that's how people end up becoming homeless. So that's first thing, is wages just haven't kept up, and that makes it really hard to stay in your house. Second is evictions. Durham is undergoing an eviction crisis right now. We are, I think, depending on how you look at it, Durham probably has the worst eviction problem in the state, as a per capita, on a per capita basis. And that obviously is a huge problem. Once a family is served with an eviction notice, it becomes very, very hard without legal help to help those folks stay in their homes. And I think the third thing that's impacting Durham right now is the overall housing market. I've heard different numbers, but let's just use this one that I've heard 20 people a day are moving to the city of Durham. And on average, they make an income $10,000 a year more than existing residents in the city. And what that means is these newcomers have more buying power in the housing market, and existing residents are more and more being priced out. And so that increase in the overall price of housing also drives displacement, evictions, and homelessness. So these are huge problems, some of them well out of the range of local government to make any differences. The macroeconomic, global economic factors of, billions of dollars of, in many cases, Chinese money looking for a place to live. And so finding investments in lots of different places, including here in Durham. What the city is doing about it is really tremendous, and I'm really proud of the work that we've done on this. On evictions, we have begun to fund a project to provide lawyers for low-income tenants facing eviction. We started the program last year. We increased funding to it in the upcoming budget, so that by the second half of the fiscal year, we'll be sending $500,000 a year to legal aid to help pay for lawyers for folks facing eviction. And so far, through the first 6 months of that program, the city-funded program, somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 80% of the clients of the eviction clinic have managed to stave off eviction thanks to the attorneys hired with the city of Durham's money, and that's fantastic. Obviously, we love that return on investment because when you prevent someone from being evicted, that stops them from becoming homeless, and that's very, very expensive for local governments and local communities to try to address. The other thing we're doing is, I hate to sound like a broken record, but the $95 million housing bond. A big chunk of that money is going towards the preservation and creation of additional housing for folks who don't make a ton of money. And that's really, really important. The best example is, say, the longtime owner of an apartment building could have 4 units, 8 units, 12 units, how many ever it does. And over time, the landlord has not increased rents as much as they could have because they like the people that are living there. They didn't get into this business to make a lot of money. But over time, the fact that they didn't raise rents means that they didn't accumulate a capital reserve to renovate the apartment building, to keep it up, to do basic maintenance and repairs. And so over 20 and 30 years, the property's falling apart, and the landlord ends up flipping that property to an out-of-state investor who kicks all the people out, tears it down, and builds something very, very expensive. What the bond package has money to do is to help these property owners either provide them low or no interest loans to do those kinds of basic renovations and repairs to keep their units up, in return for a promise that they will keep the rents reasonable for working families in Durham. The other thing we're doing is we'll have additional funds for some of our nonprofit development partners here in Durham. CASA is one of them that does that goes out and tries to buy some of these apartment buildings and then keep them as a nonprofit, keep them affordable over the long term, and then the cities also help them with those kinds of repairs. And so there's a lot of different things we can do, but I think the goal is to prevent many more people from being homeless and to try to create new places for folks to live and create some new supportive services around the folks who are currently homeless to try to keep them from going back out onto the street. It's a real problem, and like I said, some of the underlying causes are really out of our control. But as I like to say in Durham, whatever we can do, we must do. And so that's one of the reasons I'm really proud of the work we've done on this.
Definitely doing some great work. I think I've got I want you to stay on the line, Charlie, but I think I had one other caller that was trying to call in, and I think that maybe them on the line. So if you'll stay on the line, I definitely want people to know how they can help the campaign, but I want to make sure that I get at least Mr. Simpson, or I think it's the other person on the line, to at least give him a little bit of time. So if you can just hold on the line, and let me make sure that is actually who is on the other line. Dean, can you check on that for me?
I will be right here.
All right. Thanks for calling Straight Talk with Dean and Mark. You are on the line. Please let us know who you are and where you're calling from.
Yes, sir. This is Mr. Timothy Simpson calling from Columbia, South Carolina.
I appreciate you calling in, Timothy. Tell the listeners, like I said, we've been having some good guests today. We've had 2 blues singers. I had Charlie Reese, who is a city council member in Durham and who is currently running again. But tell people a little bit about what you do, Timothy, because I know when I saw what you were all about in the South Carolina area, it looked like you were doing some fascinating things. So if you'll tell our listeners a little about you, and then we'll try to give you about 15 minutes or so, because we're winding down on the show. But I definitely wanted to have time to at least get part of what we got you on, and I'll probably invite you back later on. But definitely wanted to give you the time that I promised.
Okay, yes, sir. Thanks for having me too, Mark. I was actually enjoying the conversation you was having with the councilman, just learning different things and solidifying some thoughts. But basically, I'm a serial entrepreneur, meaning I've owned and own multiple businesses. So I've owned 4 cleaning companies. 2 of them were commercial cleaning franchises, 2 tire shops. I sold my last one last year. 2 restaurants. My first one at 21, second one at 25. So I'm pretty sure I probably was the youngest restaurant owner in at least South Carolina, probably the East Coast. I've owned an event planning company, digital marketing company, lawn care service. So basically, I've owned all these different businesses, made a couple $1 million, been fired my boss, and then I recently evolved into a business coach. So now I help aspiring entrepreneurs start businesses, and then I help existing business owners scale their business. And then I also have a global youth entrepreneurship academy called Junior CEO Academy. And basically, I'm just aspiring the next generation of entrepreneurs and leaders.
And just out of curiosity, it looks to me that as I was reading that you started your first business when you were like 8.